Welcome to episode 10 of the Progression Health podcast. I'm here with Adam McDonald. And Adam, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks for having me on, Ross. My name is Adam McDonald and I'm Irish, based in Dublin. I'm a coach. I'm the owner of a company called healthmastery.co, and I'm also a competitive natural bodybuilder.
Yeah, Adam is very experienced in the trenches of actually competing, and then very knowledgeable as well. So the first time I met Adam was at a seminar, and I actually thought he should be one of the people giving the talk with the questions he was asking. They were so impressive. So this guy, he's a champion bodybuilder and also very knowledgeable. So he's got the best of both worlds. And you have a degree in nutrition, Adam. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about your background in terms of like the education
Yeah,
and then your
well,
experience?
yeah. So I started out actually. I originally studied business and French in Dublin, and then I actually tried to. I don't know if people here know what the leaving cert is, but I only applied for one course in nutrition, which is my first choice, which is a dietetics in Trinity College. But at the time, the points were very, very high. I think I did quite well. I got like 495 points and out of 600, but I think it was like 550 or something really high, where you need pretty much all A pluses. And I think I was like on average like A minus or whatever how weight works now. That was a while ago. So I ended up doing business and French because I thought that dietitian was the only way to study nutrition. I thought studying nutrition that wasn't a registered dietitian course. Like, I think there was a course in UCD, there is a course, was a waste of time. And, there's obviously a problem when you're 18, having to choose what you're going to do and having nobody to really give you any, talk you through any of this stuff, other than your parents telling you that, like, well, you're not going to get a job doing that. So, yeah, long story short, I actually went back to college 3 years ago, I think. Same university actually, to do a master's degree. Kind of got in because I'd done like multiple courses, like not like university courses, but these different kind of certifications and stuff like that to get me into a master's degree in food, diet, and health. And then I transferred 2 years ago, or I think it was 2020 actually, to a university in London and St. Mary's in Twickenham, and to do sports specific nutrition. So that's technically I'm finished, but I have to submit, because of COVID, I haven't been able to submit my my research because I need to do it. The restrictions in Ireland didn't allow me to finish that, so have to submit that, and then I'm officially finished. So that's kind of how I came about to where I am. So yeah, and then I've done like a lot of other stuff like precision nutrition and level 2, and I've done a lot of different kind of seminars, but that's from a more of a kind of institutional education path.
Very good. Yeah. So I like that, how you didn't have the undergrad to get into the postgrad, but you found a way because you were so passionate about it. Like, that's great. Hopefully you get your coursework submitted as well. Like, actually, a master's is hard enough. Don't mind having to do it during a pandemic. Like, that is so frustrating that you have to wait and just hold off because of
Yeah.
restrictions. But
Yeah, it was annoying. The reason one of the reasons I switched was because I actually live really close to the university where I was doing the food, diet, and health. It was more, there's a lot of agricultural stuff in it and food science because of the country that I live in. But it was actually done virtually, like online, which I wanted to do something in person because I like, as you mentioned, ask a lot of questions. And when they do virtual stuff, they a lot of it's pre-recorded and stuff like that. So it wasn't great. And then so that's why I went to the one in London. And so I'd be flying back over and forth. And then of course the pandemic happened, so it ended up being virtual anyway. So I've only been there like maybe 3 times, even though I was supposed to be there like maybe 10 times. But it's just, that stuff happens.
of course, yeah, you make the best of it. So, knowing what you know now, would you recommend people in the health and fitness industry do in-person courses whenever they can, or do you think virtual is like an as good option or like a viable option?
Oh well, I guess that really depends. Like, it's kind of like, do you prefer working in an office or working from home? But I like to ask lecturers questions, and that can be done through a virtual medium. But I guess a lot of universities might then just see that as a way to kind of scale it and have more students do pre-recorded stuff. So it's not like you're not getting that in-person experience. That's what I found with my other one. Plus, you can't really like go up to a university lecturer after the class and ask them some questions that you didn't want to ask, or very specific things, which is what I really like to do. It's one of the reasons why I'm doing a master's. I didn't do it so I could get a job. I'm doing it because I really like to ask questions. I've always been like that, just asking questions about anything. And that's kind of probably why I do like this area, because you can, in science, you ask questions, or you come up with a study, you ask questions that perhaps haven't been asked or haven't been answered, and then you go and try and find the answers to those. So for a long story short, I think it just really depends on what suits the person. I do like in person, but there's obviously the internet obviously opens up a lot of opportunities for people as well.
Yeah, so you're definitely very humble to realize that you don't know everything and to ask questions. And I think realizing what your strengths and weaknesses are before going into a college course is essential, because then you can decide, for example, if in person is the way to go for you as a person, or online. Just in terms of getting a college degree, do you think it's essential for people who are interested in health and fitness and working with clients?
No, I don't think so at all. Well, it depends what you want to do and how you like. If you want to, like, there's a lot of people who coach now, and they're like, they go really in depth, and they like coach. They kind of have like almost like an educational business, for very in-depth educational business, as well as coaching. Well, then it's probably required. But no, if you're just coaching people, even if it's like people in, like, say, bodybuilding shows and stuff like that. To be honest, I don't think most coaches that are actually pretty good actually have a degree in that. There's actually very little transfer from, like, say, doing sports nutrition into, say, bodybuilding or body composition, I should say, because that's not a sport or an exercise really. Of course, you learn about protein and stuff like that, but nothing. It's not really a kind of sport, so to speak. But I think it's more so just like and this might be the same for any masters, even if it's not necessarily in science, is that it just gives you a bit more of a critical mind and be able to evaluate things better, more so than the knowledge that you actually learn. But if you're, if I think we spoke a little bit about off air, if you're, coaching itself is a skill and has to be developed. And I always feel like coaching is similar to like a very good salesperson. Like, I think a very good salesperson could sell a lot of things, no matter what. You just drop them in, okay, try and sell this thing. Same as a coach. Someone who's coach in boxing could be a very good coach in, like another sport. Maybe not a team sport, but individual sport. You get me? So you don't have to be an expert. Like, it's the expertise of that sport or the discipline, but also then the coaching expertise itself. I think it's kind of almost like a lost art. But really focusing on the coaching aspect is what's going to ultimately get your clients results. I mean, if you line 10 people up against the wall, 9 of them are going to know that they need to eat more fruits and vegetables. It's not like, but yet the majority of them may not do that. So it's like, I was reading a book earlier today, which I've read before. It's called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. So there's like, your thinking mind and your kind of feeling mind, where your like emotional mind and your kind of critical mind. So like, it's about actually trying to get people to take action and to coach them through that, rather than saying like, oh, you need to eat this, eat this and that. And this, they're obviously, that's important to an extent, but you don't need to go really in depth into kind of the science behind certain things. Most of the time, that's not what people need. It's the, to be able to facilitate change and kind of behavior change and habit change and identity and values and all of these things, which are, more so the coaching rather than what you're going to learn in a degree.
Yeah, for sure. I spoke with another trainer recently, and he also had a postgrad degree. And we were both just saying how, we've done like research projects, and it was a great experience, but like really our careers, I wouldn't say they're like, they're better for it, obviously, but like, it's not like we earned a bucket load of money more because we did postgrad degrees. But what it did give us is like this like profound understanding of research. And then also that it's kind of like what you do with it from there is up to you. And then just basically for my own coaching, it gives me like a background of evidence-based practice that I can use and interpret the research, because there's so much research out there, but it's not all like good quality, or it's not all relevant. And especially for clients, you could overcomplicate things and start talking about research when, you know, they just, at the end of the day, they might need to eat more, eat less and move more. But the art of coaching is how you get them to that position. So yeah, it definitely is a bit of a lost art, and you can get kind of lost in the weeds of the science and the research. So you just touched on the bodybuilding that you have done. Can you talk a little bit about like your experience with bodybuilding and the shows you've done and stuff like that?
Yeah, I first competed in 2013, which when I was doing my first degree, I think I was in maybe second year of college or something like that. I did a kind of a fitness kind of bodybuild. It was bodybuilding, but like not bodybuilding category. I kind of always liked bodybuilding since I used to play basketball for Ireland, actually under 18, and I kind of got into lifting when I was like 16, just because it's a transition year in Ireland, so you have more time, and you can go to the gym, I think, when you're 16. So and then I kind of just got good results. I liked it. I can't remember why exactly I liked it, but I stuck to it, and I was consistent, and saw good results because I was consistent. I think I used to go 3 days a week for about 2 years. And then I just kind of started like looking on Google and researching things. I actually used to get a lot of my information from forums, which aren't really that popular anymore, but like bodybuilding.com forums, muscular development forums. And, you know, obviously that a lot of that research, a lot of that info is just rubbish, because it's just other forum members just telling you, you know, just telling you stuff. And then, yeah, I went to a few bodybuilding shows. The first pro bodybuilder I actually met was Ronnie Coleman, who was like the biggest bodybuilder ever, I think. Well, not the biggest, but one of the biggest, probably the most decorated Mr. Olympia. And then I just really, I don't know, when someone that size walks into a room, it's just like very, I'd say, inspiring and awing. And then I wouldn't say that's the day that I just like, I'm going to do bodybuilding, but it just naturally kind of progressed into, I wanted to compete at some stage. I went to France for a year because of my degree, and I kind of put on a decent amount of weight, like fat, because I was just like drinking a lot as you do in college, and you know, eating and stuff, still lifting, but just I got pretty heavy. I got like to 210 pounds at the age of like 21, and I was decently fat, like maybe 26, 27, probably nearly 30% body fat. And then I was like, when I got home from that, I was just like, okay, now I'm going to just start prepping. So I hired a coach. It was actually a client of Lane Norton's. Lane Norton is somebody I found, you know, I found when I think I Googled teen bodybuilding, and then I found natural bodybuilding because he was writing articles about it. I wanted to work with Lane Norton, but I didn't have like $2,000 to work with him. So I hired one of his clients, actually, who was an actual pro bodybuilder as well. He doesn't compete anymore. He's a chiropractor. But I did my first show then. So I dieted down for 6 months, lost like 40 pounds. And then from there, I competed again 2016 in WBFF, which is like a untested kind of organization. Again, this is like more like fitness modeling. That was in Ontario, Canada, in Toronto. And then I actually decided, like, I actually just really want to do natural bodybuilding because it's natural. Like during that WBFF show, like a lot of the guys were not natural, which is fine. It's not a tested show. And then I just, you know, I'd always throughout like natural bodybuilding, I never felt like I had the size to do it. And then I actually started competing in actually tested natural bodybuilding in 2019. So I did a couple shows in 2019. And then that's pretty much since I've last competed, because COVID hit, and also, you know, I need some time to kind of progress.
Wow, yeah. So very extensive experience. Have you seen the documentary about Ronnie Coleman? And he says,
Yeah.
they ask him right now, Ronnie Coleman. So he's kind of like, we'll say he's like, you know, much less than what he was in terms of his physical, you know, stature. He's crippled. He's on crutches pretty much. and he looks like in a pretty sorry state, basically. And someone asked him, do you regret anything about your bodybuilding career? Because obviously your health is declining rapidly right now and your life expectancy is, a lot lower. And he goes, the only regret I have is that I didn't do that extra rep on like an 805-pound squat, something, something extremely kind of hardcore and rigid in his mindset. What do you think of his kind of approach? Do you think it's like, would you be kind of against that kind of like, that hardcore mindset, or do you think, the achievements speak for themselves and that's what matters?
It's hard to say. I mean, like his type of training, did he really need to do sets of 3 with that amount of weight to achieve the level of muscularity he did? The current research would say no, and he could have done a lot safer. The mindset thing is a bit different. I think, did that help push him? I would say definitely. But, does that mean everybody who wants to do their best adopt that mindset? I would actually disagree, because survivorship bias. Ronnie Coleman already had the genetics to be number one. There's probably 90,000. I don't know. There's a lot of people probably that have that mindset or took that mindset that are maybe in a similar position to Ronnie Coleman, but nobody ever heard of them because they maybe had the same mindset and the drive, but they didn't have the genetics to get to where Ronnie Coleman is. And that's kind of what I say to the clients that I work with, even that compete in bodybuilding, is like, maybe to get that extra 2%, yeah, okay, you completely, remove yourself from any social situations. You have the exact same meals every single day. You go to bed at 9 o'clock and you wake up early. You train when the gym's empty. You completely remove any stressors from that would be associated with yourselves that may affect your bodybuilding prep, and that might get you the extra 2%, but it might mean that you're going to place 4th in the local show instead of 6th. We're not talking about somebody here at like the WMBF World Championships, and you're going to be 2nd if you don't do these things rather than 1st. So the impact that would have is so insignificant in terms of placings, but the negative impact that it could have on your life in general and the happiness, because like, why are you doing this bodybuilding if it's not bringing you happiness or some sort of fulfillment? It could be quite severe. So that's why when I see like often like coaches who do very well, and obviously people follow people who do well, and that's why they have lots of followers, and again, survivorship bias, when they're showing their life and all they do is focus their day around just their bodybuilding prep, just because they do well and they do that doesn't mean that you should, or you could, or even if you could, you should do that, because you still may not place where they are, because again, genetics is a huge component. It's hard to say exactly how much, but I've definitely heard it from geneticists saying DNA makes up at least 50% of kind of the results and things that you get, nature versus nurture.
Yeah, I think I read a study before where it said if 2 parents are obese, the offspring have a 50% chance of obesity, regardless of like the environment or their upbringing, which is, proves your point there. So we kind of talked a little bit off air about how the fitness industry, survivorship bias, it's alive and well in the fitness industry. Can you talk a little bit about that for people who mightn't be aware of it? Because I think the general population take a lot of things in the fitness industry at face value, and they say like, oh, this looks good, I'll try this, or that sounded, he made a convincing argument, I'll go for this, So could you just explain survivorship bias and just things for people to be aware of in the fitness industry?
Yeah, I mean, I probably can't think of the exact definition of it, but basically like people who do well and are at the top will often get results in spite of what they do. And you don't see the 99% of other people who try to do the same or follow the same thing that don't achieve those results. But in social media or in life, we only ever see extremes. We see extreme negative stuff like the news, and that draws attention, or the extreme positive. So then we curate our lives with these 2 extremes, and then we just feel like they're the norms. So when people see a physique, like it's not uncommon when I know that my genetics are I wouldn't say amazing, but definitely favorable for building muscle. But I would get like a client, and I've been lifting also for like 14 years or more about that, I'd say. yeah, about 14 years. But I would get like a client application that hasn't been lifting for, maybe 2 years, and they say, well, I don't want to get huge, but I just want to look like kind of like you, like fitness model. And I'm like, well, you do realize like that photo is like 5% body fat, feel awful. So 14 years lifting, but like they just see that's, oh well, that's kind of like that's an average physique, where it's like, no, that's actually above average. Like that's like, not, I won natural Mr. Ireland that year. It's like, it's not like a beach physique. So I think, I think a lot of people, and then obviously you have like drugs and stuff like that, which people often don't disclose. But again, it's because the cream rises to the top. The best physiques exercise, you don't follow most of the time people don't follow the guy or the girl with average physique that will put out good content and helpful content. You put out the girl or the guy who looks fantastic, small waist, wide shoulders, low body fat percentage, great body fat distribution. And then you think, well, if they're doing something and it's working for them, then that might, or that must work for me, or that's the best approach for me. And I like that's probably the same in everything. You don't see the people who fall away. You only see the people who remain, and then you just assume, you attribute their success to what they've done to get there, whereas people may have got there in spite of what they've done. Kind of like we said with the professional bodybuilders, Phil Heath. Like, I was interested in basketball when I was younger. Obviously, you could play basketball. Actually started back recently again, but like when he was in his early 20s in university playing Division 1 basketball, he was way bigger than I am now. And he would be natural then because NCAA it's tested. He didn't even really lift weights, so why would he take any anabolics anyway? But he looked way bigger than I actually do now, even though I've been trying to be as big as I possibly can. So he was gonna rise to the top in spite of what he'd done, not because the arm workout that you see in Flex magazine to get his arms that big.
Yeah, it's like the winners write history, so they can kind of almost tell you whatever they want. Oh, I woke up at 5 a.m. and I had my Rocky style raw eggs or something. It's like you were always going to be the best. And
Yeah.
yeah, it reminds me, actually, I think people say that Kai Green was the best natural bodybuilder of all time. Like, his physique was unbelievable. So if you see, like, that's the best example, I think, of genetics. Like, obviously he worked really hard as well. It's not to discount that, but like, he was always going to be unbelievable. And it just makes me think, so you're talking about basketball. I'm like a huge NBA fan. Have you heard of the Dublin born, but he's American based basketball player, Aiden Harris? He's out here. He's in college now. Yeah. Have you seen his physique?
I've seen what he looks like. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's a basketball player, but if he turned his hand to natural bodybuilding, is it fair to say he would be very successful?
Well, he's like 6'11", so it'd be hard to say because his legs are probably extremely difficult to fill out. But I think in terms of muscle building, when you look at somebody like I think he originates from, I think it might be Nigeria or something. But those like African genetics, where it's like a lot of the top bodybuilders are from African descent, and so for some reason their muscle insertions, like how their muscles insert at one end and the other, they just looks bigger. Whereas like they would be the same weight, but the way their muscles look, it's just kind of like more like clouds almost. So they've got like big and full muscle bellies. So yeah, I think like he looks like he has huge shoulders, and people probably ask him like, "What do you do for your shoulders?" And he probably just does like shoulder presses once every 2 weeks and plays basketball. So that is like a good example. But I think it's probably like people who are at the top of sport in a lot of sports, I should say, especially like kind of high intensity sports, they will have the best physique genetically. They will be inclined to be good at a lot of sports. Again, this kind of like the survivorship bias, like, yeah, there was somebody who's very good skillfully at basketball, but they didn't have the physique, or they were slightly over fat, or they just genetically couldn't perform well, or low body fat, so they weren't as fast and they fell away, or they were a Division 1 basketball player but had to play in Europe and not the NBA. So it's kind of like an accumulation of all the different, if you think about different pillars like physical dimensions and genetics, skills, talent and connections and all of these things, like those who have the top, all of them are the only ones who make it. And again, that's survivorship bias rather than saying, well, he went out and Kobe Bryant shot 10,000 or 1,000 shots a day. So like if I shoot 1,000 shots a day, I'm going to be a shooting guard in the LA Lakers. You don't realize like Kobe Bryant's like 6'7". He's got like physical specimen, and then obviously like very skillful as well. It's hard to say like in these kind of skill sports like how much does actual talent play a role, because it's skill based, but it definitely would, I guess.
For sure, yeah, sure. Kobe's dad was in the NBA, or if not a professional basketball player, so like he had that in his favor. And then going back to Aiden Harris, I saw one of his meals he posted, and he goes, eating better. So not to throw shade at this guy, because he's like, he's working very hard, he's doing amazing. But his version of eating better was like a steak and mac and cheese and like a little bit of vegetables. So it's like, that's one meal. I'm not like trying to pick on it, but it's kind of like these people with better genetics, they are fortunate that they can they have more wiggle room to do whatever they want. They've almost more potential with physique based sports and stuff like that.
Well, it's actually something I asked Alberto Nunez like a couple of years ago. You mentioned that it may have actually been on the bodybuilding forums, like could have been maybe 11, maybe 10 years ago, or maybe a little bit less. But those always seem to be the natural bodybuilders were more interested in the science. Even if they weren't necessarily always right, they were trying to understand the science a bit more, and the likes of 3D MJ, more so than the guys who are, say, on the enhanced side. So like on the muscular development forums, the guys, they don't really care that much about the science, but yet you had Lane Norton and Alberto Nunez and Eric Helms and all these always kind of talking about the science parts, and how insulin may affect muscle protein breakdown and these kind of things, and looking somewhat at the research where it's completely disregarded for the other side of things. And I asked Alberto, why does he think that the natural bodybuilders kind of focus more on the science? And he kind of says because, well, they really need to squeeze out the last few percentages to try and maximize their physique, because you're never going to be massive. So you're never going to grow 20 pounds in a year. So you're trying to see, what can you do to try and get this last percent. Whereas you see the guys who, and they're natural guys who are, were at the time top in the natural game, natural pros. But you see the guys at the Olympia stage, they will, even the guy who won the classic, Chris Bumstead, like what did he put on, like 15 pounds of muscle in a year? Like, it's, obviously genetics, obviously their training and everything and work very hard, but like, then you have drugs and stuff like that as well, which, they play a significant role. Like these things, it's just not as important for them. And then when you think about other sports that maybe aren't like physique based, body composition based, like in basketball, like maybe spending more time working on your 3-pointer is going to get you better results than actually trying to take your nutrition from 80% to 95%, if that makes sense. So there's so many different moving parts. Whereas like you said, I was speaking to an Olympian from Team GB, 2 Olympians in summertime that were on the track and field team. And they said they don't focus on the nutrition at all, and they don't get any nutrition advice, and they didn't think it was important. And obviously it is important, and they probably could place better, but they get really good results in spite of what they do. So I think with something like basketball, like even like the team that I play, there's like a semi-pro team, and I offered them some support for free, like just nutritional advice. And there's things that they could focus on a lot more to be better basketball players than their nutrition, because nutrition is important, but it plays a piece of a bigger puzzle. So like if somebody's like 25 pounds overweight, losing a bit of weight first rather than trying to maximize your nutrition will probably have a bigger impact. But not to say you can't do all at the same time, but I think, like you said, these guys are going to do well in spite of what they do. But the guys who are at the very, very top, I think, and who do actually realize their full potential. Like if you probably look at Kobe Bryant, he probably did eat very, very well. Like he might have had a personal chef or something like that, but he wasn't probably eating mac and cheese. He was probably eating well, probably didn't really drink much, if at all. but yeah, there's guys who are gonna, there may be other parts of their game or whatever it is that it might not take them from where they are now to much better, if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I know I heard a story about how the dietitian, I think it was, for the LA Lakers had to like lock up Dwight Howard's cupboards because he had like an addiction to candy. And this is Dwight Howard, right? So if you don't know who Dwight Howard is, he's probably the most athletic specimen of a basketball player you'll ever see. And this guy was just eating candy. He had almost like an addiction. And he didn't potentially make the peak of his ability, maybe because of that, you could say. Whereas, for example, Ronaldo or LeBron, they tick all the boxes and in terms of nutrition and hard work and stuff. And maybe that's why they have such long careers. But something that was interesting you brought up is alcohol. So I recently trained with my coach, and he looks, so healthy and so young, and he didn't drink at all for his life. He competed in national bodybuilding, and he bumped into another coach and bodybuilder, and it just looked like they didn't drink. And I was just thinking about like, how much of an effect does alcohol have on health? And do you like, what's your kind of approach to like alcohol, and what's your take on it in terms of like, can people compete, or can they maximize fat loss and stuff like that while also drinking? I know like some people do it, but what's your opinion or approach to it?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think like you need to separate a bodybuilding prep from like sustainable fat loss, I think. So like I would often get people who've never had a successful fat loss phase and say, I want to do a bodybuilding prep and then just stay lean at the end. It's like, the people who do bodybuilding preps, if you've never done it before, and this isn't some sort of self-aggrandizement, but it's really, really hard because it's an incessant thing that's over your head all the time, where it's like you're hungry, tired, like 24/7. So it's just like similar to like an ultra marathon or something. It's not like difficult all at once, but spread out is just really hard. So people who do preps have kind of these baseline habits of nutrition. They know that they don't go out and just eat a cake and then realize they've only got 400 calories left and it's 1 o'clock in the day. Like they have general good nutritional habits and want to push it. So for a bodybuilding prep, it's an extreme, it's getting your body fat to as low as you possibly can, and it negatively impacts your health towards the end, to an extent. And drinking alcohol is basically a quote unquote like empty calories. There's pretty much no nutritional value in it at all. And when you're getting very lean, your calories will get so low that you won't want to use, so to speak, those calories on alcohol. I do drink myself alcohol. I like to drink it. I don't drink too frequently. I try not to drink too much either, just because I really don't like hangovers. But I used to drink it when I was younger quite a bit, like most people probably in college and stuff like that. But when I was doing my last prep, I think I had a drink, or I had a couple of drinks like about 8 weeks before my first show. Now I competed in July and then September and November. After that, I didn't really drink. Calories are just low. I didn't want to go out and use up a lot of calories to drink some alcohol, and maybe might have had one drink after each show. Like I think after one of the shows I had some whiskey or something like that, like a glass or two. But yeah, in general, I think it doesn't necessarily impact like muscle protein synthesis that much. I haven't really looked too much into it. I know there is some research. It's very hard, obviously, to pass like an ethics board and get people drunk and see how it affects them. But I think that the main thing that I noticed with people in general is just like obviously there's a lot of calories in alcohol. You can manage that by having lower calorie options, but it's the food that they'll consume. It's the knock-on effect the day after, where they'll be lazy. They won't exercise as much, and they won't move as much. They'll often order like junk food, and then they often won't train. And if you drink enough, it's going to impact you for like a couple of days, and it will affect your training. If you're doing that every week or every other week, then you've got a couple of days that you're probably in a calorie maintenance or perhaps even a surplus. And the problem with that in a fat loss phase is that you feel like you're working hard, because you could be working hard for like 5 days a week. And if you're drinking at the weekend, you're not eating much, but you're drinking quite a bit, like some pints or whatever you want to call it. Then you may not actually get any of the benefits of feeling like you're working hard, but you're still working hard. So you're in this constant state of, okay, I'm working hard because, you know, for 5 days you are, but yet you're not getting the results, because you've got those 2 other days where you're not, you know, you're in maintenance. So you're better off if you have periods where you're gonna know you're gonna be drinking. You're better off almost not trying to go through a fat loss phase, or else severely pulling back your expectations. So we talked a little bit about like bodybuilding prep. I was planning to, I would like to do a bodybuilding prep again next year, but I know that I'm going to like 7 weddings or something like that. Plus like some bachelor parties, stag parties with my friends. 3 or 4 of them are abroad. I know I'm going to be drinking a bit. Like I'm not going to go crazy, but I know I'm going to be drinking. I'm not going to be weighing my food. Like, so I probably would like, well, I'm not going to prep next year because I just can't, because unless I severely want to restrict myself, I know I'm now not going to be in deficits on these days. My sleep isn't going to be great. The subsequent training when I get home that week isn't going to be great. And if this is one every month, it's it's not insignificant. It'd be fine for a general fat loss phase, but when you want to do a prep, like that would severely hamper it. On the other side of things, I did read before many years ago somebody saying like, I wouldn't want to, I wouldn't drink at all because it may impact my training the next day, and that adds up to 52 training days a year. Um, that I guess it really depends on your values. If you value your health, but you also, if social, if social kind of parties and life is very important to value to you, then that's fine. I have worked with clients who basically just travel all the time and just go to parties and stuff like that, and as part of their life they're in that kind of party, that's their job, like in the kind of party scene. That's fine. It's not like a character, a flaw, or a judgment. It just depends on what you value. Some people don't like to drink at all. If you didn't like to go out or party and you just purely focus on like bodybuilding, I personally would say that's kind of a little bit boring, but that's just what I do. So for me, I try to kind of balance the both. When I do get into prep phase, I know that I can't really go out as much as I would like, or to drink as much. I can't go and have like 4 pints or something like that. Like if I was going, like I like football as well, like soccer. I'm not sure if you're American listeners, but I go to the Ireland games, and I'm going to the one against Portugal in 2 weeks or something like that. And I went to the last one, and like I would have like 3 or 4 pints, maybe like 2 before, maybe 2 after. And that would be kind of it. But yet if I was doing a prep, I couldn't do that because that would be 800 calories of a 2,200 calorie diet. It just wouldn't be feasible, or technically it would, but I wouldn't want to take that many calories and take it away from my carbs or whatever, because be in a deficit. So it's all about kind of trade-offs. I definitely think you can drink, but you need to kind of set your expectations a little bit lower. Maybe you're not going to have the physique of a champion natural bodybuilder if you're following the lifestyle of somebody who goes out and drinks, fairly frequently. That's just the way kind of cookie crumbles.
Yeah, exactly. It's understanding the consequences of what you do, and being realistic, as you say, as well, which is very important. So I think just thinking about like what your goal is, if you have a goal, and then thinking how alcohol ties in with that is very useful, because you can run into problems down the line, as you say, where you are working hard 5 days, 2 days, you might be drinking, and then you're not getting the results you want, and you're kind of you're a bit confused as to why that's happening. But that could easily happen. So following on from that, on the flip side of it, so one of your podcasts you had with Jeff Alberts, and you talked about a lot of people are trying to build muscle. That's like, I know fat loss is probably more common with clients, but people do want to build muscle as well. It's very important. Can you talk a little bit about like the fact that you do have to gain a little bit of body fat when you're trying to build muscle typically, and how to kind of navigate that mentally challenging scenario?
Yeah, I think it's kind of an area of contention. Like, do you need to actually be in a calorie surplus to gain muscle? Because it's not like an on-off switch. But it probably is beneficial to gain, especially if you're skinny. Like if you're skinny, you're not going to gain 50 pounds of muscle by staying the same weight. You have to gain 50 pounds. But I think it's really about finding where you perform and feel best. the way I kind of, I don't know where I heard this, but it was many, many years ago I heard this, and it kind of really resonated with me, was that if you think about when you were like 14 years old or 15, before you ever started messing with dieting or body weight, and think about like what was your body composition? Obviously, you weren't going to be very muscular, but like what was your body fat? Were you like rake thin and had like very skinny, or were you kind of chubby? I think that's probably for a lot of people going to be the body composition that you're actually going to feel the best at in terms of hormonally. Obviously, environment will impact that quite a lot. If you live in like some southern states in the US, families are going to be eating chicken buckets. That's going to impact that a lot. But, or if you're from maybe a lower socioeconomic class, often obesity is higher and things like that. But I think that's probably a good heuristic to have. So if you're very, very skinny, very lean, you can probably do well at kind of staying relatively lean. But if you weren't, like I wasn't overly fat, but I wasn't very lean either. So for me, maybe like over 15% body fat, is where I actually really feel and perform well. And at that point, there's definitely research showing that, when you're lower in body fat or when you're, dieting there for competition, testosterone is suppressed, cortisol is increased, basically all the hormones and things that you don't want to be low are low, and other things that you want to be high aren't high. So you basically are a lot healthier when you're at that kind of body fat set point range. So that's often not a body fat that you're gonna necessarily be comfortable looking at in the mirror. Again, comes back to what we talked about, the survivorship bias. If you're following just like Gymshark athletes who are 7% body fat year round, you're gonna feel not great, or you're gonna feel almost inferior if you're even a few percent higher than that, because you're not at their standard. But for most people, you're probably going to function, perform in the gym, sleep better relationship with food at a higher body fat percentage. So I think you got to keep the goal. So if your goal is to stay lean, and you want to stay lean and be lean, that's fine, but that comes with a price that you might not gain as much muscle as fast as you possibly could. If your goal is, like, say, to do a bodybuilding show and you want to improve between your seasons, then you need to make sure that you're maximizing your hormones, your anabolic hormones, maximizing your sleep, which ties in with that, of course, and then you're maximizing your training performance. And that might come with a body fat, or for most, it'll likely come with a body fat that you're not too happy looking at in the mirror. But the goal is to get on stage with more muscle, or to get on the beach with more muscle. It's not to stay lean for 2 years. And I've worked with people who want to stay lean all the time, but yet to have the goal of getting more muscle, and then 6 months later, a year later, they haven't really changed much because they just wanted to stay lean the whole time, and then they're not really that happy. But that's the thing, you got to keep the goal, and yeah, it's not easy to do. It definitely comes with time. It's a lot more pressure, I think, and when you're younger you feel it a bit more. Definitely when I was like 20, 21, and I think that's maybe one of some of the reasons why I actually did the fitness modeling rather than the bodybuilding, because it's more like mainstream. It's more like, it's more socially accepted, and it's like it's almost gets you more kind of social points, or has, gets your influencer numbers up or whatever it is. More like people like the kind of the fitness model look, whereas people don't really like. It's kind of weird when you're getting in kind of a thong and you've got like glute striations, and lines in your ass and stuff like that. That's not so much so socially accepted. So it definitely, as you mature, that gets easier. But I think the most important thing is to keep the goal and realize that most people will perform at a body fat percentage that's not necessarily going to be one that you're too happy with. But if you focus on, like with clients that I work with, and in myself, is not to focus too much on how you look all the time in the off season, but how you're performing, how are you sleeping, how are your energy levels. These are the foundations that are going to change your physique.
Yeah, that's something I noticed before, where when I was in a mass gaining phase, as you call it, my performance in the gym was much better. And that's so motivational and like so much more fun and enjoyable for your training when you're hitting like new numbers, and I guess your energy levels are better as well, and you can kind of just have a bit more flexibility because you have extra calories to play with. So yeah, I think definitely not checking your physique as much when you're in a surplus is definitely a very important piece of advice. So then just another podcast you had was about like, is bodybuilding healthy? And you talked a little bit about comparison, and it's a very I don't know, judgmental maybe, or like subjective type of sport is one way to describe it. What's your opinion on, is it healthy? And I assume you're going to say, it depends, obviously, but as a whole, what do you think?
I think yes. So I mean, bodybuilding recreationally, lifting weights, focusing a bit more on your diet, especially in a world where, at least in Western society, obesity levels are going crazy, and people are living longer as well. So people are getting fatter but or heavier, but also people are living longer because of medicine advances. But then that's becoming a burden more so on the healthcare system, and obviously sarcopenia comes with age. So having more muscle, I think it's when you're two standard deviations below average, that's considered sarcopenia. So building muscle, having some sort of foundational knowledge of what protein is and what carbs are and what calories are, which I think a lot of people don't really know. That they've heard it. I think a lot of people won't be aware. Of course, we mentioned that intellect doesn't necessarily drive behavior, but at least having that awareness is definitely helpful. But I think from like competitive bodybuilding, like in terms of the untested bodybuilding, I don't think that's healthy. Yeah, is being 270 pounds as a bodybuilder healthier than being 270 pounds as an obese person? Probably, but I do think that both of them put a lot of pressure on your heart. And then of course, like what you have to do to get to that 270 pounds. What sort of anabolics do you have to push? How does that affect your heart? And there is definitely research on how that affects like the growth of like the left ventricle, I think, and cholesterol levels and everything like that. And yeah, but that's kind of obvious that it's not too healthy to be taking drugs that are for animals often. Then when it comes to natural bodybuilding, I think it's definitely healthier. The question that I kind of ask, and obviously this hasn't really been looked at in research because it's such a niche population, but I think gaining weight in general probably isn't the healthiest thing you can do, because you will gain some fat. But I think if you're still active, you're not gaining weight extremely fast, and most people aren't gaining a ton of weight, and often they're losing it. And at least they try and make that lean mass or muscle mass. I don't think it's the least healthiest thing, the least healthiest thing you can do. But there's definitely healthier things. I think like keeping your body weight stable and doing a bit more aerobic activity is probably healthier, but to what degree? Probably not a huge amount. I think again, you don't want to be in a huge surplus and eating tons of sugar. I think it can affect like postprandial triglyceride levels. That's usually though long-term thing that happens when someone's eating a lot of food for a very long time, like years, and is overweight. So again, it's very hard to say in the context of someone who's training weights, who's active, maybe goes through these bulking cutting phases. But I do think in general it's probably healthy. Like I said, not the healthiest thing. It's probably healthy if you play basketball and keep your weight stable, but it's probably not extremely unhealthy.
Yeah, you can make it a bit healthier by doing stuff like playing a bit of basketball and working on your cardiovascular fitness, which is missing typically from your resistance training workouts. Adam, how are you for time right now? Are you good? Or
yeah, I'm good. Yeah, I can keep going.
So just a few quick fire questions. You already have a post about how to get bigger arms, but I'll let you explain a little bit about it. How do you get bigger arms? Every guy wants bigger arms, and also just calves or just lagging body parts. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think one thing that I actually heard, I used to own a gym a few years ago, and the guy used to say, if you want to gain 1 inch in your arms, you have to gain 20 pounds of muscle all over your body, which it does, like, at the time I thought that made sense. I thought it sounds like some sort of Charles Poliquin thing that somebody would say, but yeah, that's obviously not true, because if you can still gain 20 pounds of muscle and then, you know, gain pretty much nothing on your arms if you don't train them. But I think the most important thing is, well, one, if it's a lagging body part, and again, go back to Alberto Nunez, because I asked him after my last show, he was there in the crowd. This is in New York. I was like, what do you think I need to do? And he's probably like, well, you probably need bigger arms. And he's saying, well, you know, your weak point is never going to be a strong point. So like, if it's a weak point genetically, then it's never going to be necessarily a strong point. But I think that the first thing is make sure that you're doing the form correctly, especially with the likes of arms. So, you know, a lot of people the form can just be all over the shop, where you'll see it in the gym all the time. People are just going way too heavy. And, you know, other muscle groups take over. The arms aren't really getting hit properly. I think hitting them from multiple exercises from multiple kind of planes is a good idea. So you're training with a bias on the long head and the short head. So in a lengthened position, shortened position. So kind of having a few different exercises, but then trying to just progress on those exercises, not trying to progress too fast. Like, you know, obviously a 10% increase on an arm curl is huge, but the weights might go up, you know, maybe 15%. You go from a 12 kilo to a 15 kilo. That's a massive jump. So, you know, maybe just adding more reps over time, not really trying to focus too much on adding weight, but maybe just, you know, honing the form. There's also been some research on actually the mind muscle connection in the upper body, where you can actually think about the training the arms. I think it doesn't really seem to translate to lower body, but actually thinking about the exercise that you're doing. I actually like to, again, think about like a professional bodybuilder, because it's really easy to imagine them doing an exercise because their muscles are so big that you can see, or, you know, watch a video of it. Whereas like you might look at your arms and like, I can barely see my bicep when I flex it. So, but if you see like, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger doing a bicep curl, you can really see it, how it lengthens and it shortens. So kind of thinking about it, how you train that. And then for some people, frequency can work. So doing more frequently can work well as well. Obviously, sometimes more frequently means by default more volume, but by keeping the same amount of sets, but actually spreading them out throughout the week, maybe it's because they're more fresh, but also maybe giving it a specific arm day as well. So there are little things that you perhaps can try, but I think the main thing was probably going to be form, making sure your form is good. For calves, I think most people just don't train calves enough, to be honest. They just do maybe 3 sets once a week and then say, oh, my calves are small. It's like, well, maybe train them with like, 15 sets a week. Again, the prioritization principle, like focus on it first early, maybe put a rest day before and after. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it for kind of weak points.
That makes me think of 2 things. So one is that I was at Body Power, the bodybuilding expo in Birmingham, and in the gym afterwards, I was extremely fortunate that all the fitness influencers happened to train after, and I heard about it, so I went there, right? And Phil Heath is training arms, and I'm like, oh my god, Phil Heath, this is amazing. He's on the phone, right? He's like leaned over like this, and he's got the dumbbell, and he's just curling away, and I'm like, oh my god, like how the hell is he got such big arms and he's putting such little effort into it? Kind of goes back to the genetics point, but he's obviously done the hard work and all the points that you recommended earlier on to get him such big arms. Yeah.
Or he could have done none of them and just got it anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And then, I think people definitely, they don't explore all the options, like you said, you know. So for calves, they'll say, oh, I train calves all the time. Why aren't they big enough? And it's like, trying all the things you mentioned, like frequency, using better form. You know, people don't use proper technique, and even the basics. For example, I noticed, I was wondering, like, you know, I train arms every week. Why aren't they bigger? And it's so obvious, but like, I just wasn't applying progressive overload. I wasn't doing more progressively over time. And then when I realized that, I was like, I need to train with more intensity. So it can be little things like that make a big difference over the long term.
So some other things I just thought of as well that have worked for me as well is things like static stretching after it. So a loaded stretch, like I think it was originally called DC stretching, which you'll stretch for like 30 seconds. there stretching may have an effect on hypertrophy. I think there's no harm in adding some sort of loaded stretch at the end of a session. And then going back to kind of the gaining thing, it's probably better to be in a surplus if you want to get bigger. So regardless of what body part that is. So kind of these things, and then just being consistent. But then also realizing that, like I said, if it's a weak point, it's probably never going to be a strong point as well. So
yeah, a bit of awareness helps a lot. Then in terms of ab training, are abs just like any other muscle and they need to be trained, or are they really just made in the kitchen? What's the expert opinion on that, the bodybuilder's opinion?
yeah, I think people should train abs, to be honest. I mean, from a cosmetic point of view, even for sports performance, it's good to have a strong core, so to speak. But yeah, I mean, I some people will say you don't need to. Often they already have good abs, but I find that most people should train their abs. Most people don't have the muscle there. I think I have a decent abs just genetically. They've grown well off just doing compound stuff. But even myself, I've actually started to train them maybe 3 times a week over the last year. I think most people should be training them the same way as you would train in any other muscle group. Usually a bit higher reps, just for form reasons, but also something that you can really get some sort of spinal flexion, because often people will just do knee raises and they keep they're basically just moving their hips, and it's really kind of not doing a whole lot for the abs. So really trying to curl your back, which is often what you're kind of in PT training shirts told not to do, but like really do the opposite of a back extension and try and just load that over time. I think most people should. Don't really recommend people train obliques just because most people don't want a wider waist. And if you get lean enough, there's going to be some muscle there that will show the obliques. But yeah, I think people definitely should train abs.
Yeah, it's like any other muscle. It needs to be stretched or lengthened and then contracted. Yeah. All right, Adam, that was amazing. I feel like we could talk all day, but I have to be mindful of your time. Is there anything that you want to mention that you're doing? Any projects or anything that's coming up that you want to plug?
No, I guess check out the podcast that I do. I've been doing a podcast for over 2 years now. Plan to get one out every week, but it ends up being about one every 2 weeks now. 2 weeks, just trying to get guests on is, as you know, it's difficult to kind of line up calendars, and then you kind of run out of topics a little bit as well. So I'm kind of going to be going back over stuff. But yeah, it's called the Health Mastery Show, and I speak typically to maybe bodybuilders or researchers and try to maybe break down stuff into more practical applications. So you can check that out on most podcast platforms and YouTube. And I don't really do much YouTube other than put the podcasts up, but I will be starting doing more videos on that as well very, very soon, because I've signed up to, I don't know if you've heard of him, Ali Abdal. I signed up to his part-time YouTube Academy. So it's the sunk cost is going to really get me on that one. So I'll probably try to put more videos up as well. And then you can just check out my Instagram, I guess. I'm doing a little bit more writing as well, actually more so in sports nutrition, for Resilient Nutrition. They're like an endurance based company that make kind of fitness foods, so to speak, like kind of long range fuels. Just because down the road, that's the kind of area that I want to end up working in. But yeah, that's pretty much it. And really appreciate you having me on, man.
Yeah, it's been brilliant to chat to you, and your content's very evidence based, so you can trust it. And the podcast guests you have on are very high quality. I aspire to have something similar. So thanks for coming on, and we'll talk again soon.